Hi everyone, it's Kate from the Department of Health, Kinesiology, and Recreation. And for my vlog today, I have a focus of spirituality, but I've actually added the context of environmental. So kind of a merge of the two topics for today's vlog. And I just wanted to first start by discussing the definition of spirituality. So I appreciated in the 7 Domains of Women's Health text how the idea of what they call spiritual development on page 171 discusses this sense of connectedness, purpose, and loving kindness. And for myself, when I typically define spirituality, I describe it as a connectedness to purpose and others that helps us see something larger than ourselves. And so it really is a relatively broad topic and something that I think can be defined for each individual in different ways. So one thing that I also love from the text was this idea of the dance of the spirit. And this is actually what prompted kind of my thought process for today's vlog is under the third step, which is creating. It discusses this idea of engagement and essentially this kind of connectedness through creating. And then the next step following that is this idea of dwelling, and the idea of place and presence are kind of the key components of that. So this idea of place really emerged as kind of that connection to environmental health. So when we're considering our values, I wanted to think about ways to navigate values. And really quickly, I just want to highlight a tool that I really like. This is from the VIA Institute on Character, and there's actually a free survey that you can take to essentially outline character traits or characteristics of self or character strengths that are most important to you. And even though I don't think it's a perfect match to exactly who we are or what our spirituality is, I think it gives us a starting point for that conversation. So from there, I wanted to just highlight a couple of studies that I think bring up some great points about the concept of spirituality, and specifically thinking about place, using this idea of nature or natural environments as a place to gather or cultivate our spirituality. So McCarran and Morado looked at this idea of how our level of happiness changes as we go into outdoor spaces. And essentially what they found is that using GPS as a tracker and then this app to essentially do a survey on your happiness level or subjective well-being, they found that on average, study participants were happier outdoors or in green or natural habitats than they were in urban environments. So really just starting this conversation of the fact that being outdoors seems to be beneficial. Next, I wanted to look at a text that I really appreciate. This is a text by Florence Williams, and it is called The Nature Fix, and it essentially discusses how being outdoors improves many different aspects of our lives. And I just wanted to read one quote that I really liked from the text. It just says, "One of the compelling theories about nature is that it acts like an advanced drug, a sort of smart pill that works selectively on the default network in the way estrogen therapy makes bones stronger by targeting some estrogen receptors in the body, but not others that might increase cancer risk. It would appear that when we have a positive nature experience, it engages what's good in the default network without allowing us to wallow too much in what's problematic. Studies show that when people walk in nature, they obsess over negative thoughts much less than when they walk in a city." So that's pretty fascinating. And then one other study that I wanted to highlight really quickly is by Mao and colleagues, and they looked at the influence of what they call forest bathing, or just spending time in nature, to health benefits of elderly individuals with chronic heart failure. And they found that cardiovascular disease-related pathological factors, so it's things that influence our risk for cardiovascular disease, are much decreased by spending time in nature, specifically through this idea of forest bathing. And their suggestion from this study is that this is a tool that we can then use as adjunctive therapy for cardiovascular disorder, patients with cardiovascular disorders. So from this, I had a lot of really random thoughts. So I hope you'll bear with me while I share a few more things that I think are really interesting in the way of spirituality and nature. Wendell Berry is an author, a poet, and a novelist that I appreciate. And he discusses this idea of connecting spirituality or religion to nature. And so in this, he's talking about the Bible, but I think it can be related to any spiritual concept, not just religious concept that we're looking at. And it says, in speaking of the Bible, it is best read and understood outdoors. And again, I think this can relate to anything that we're wanting to investigate in the way of spirituality. And the farther outdoors, the better. Or that has been my experience of it. Passages that within walls seem improbable or incredible, outdoors seem merely natural. This is because outdoors we are confronted everywhere with wonders. We see the miraculous is not extraordinary, but the common mode of existence. It is our daily bread. So then, from there, just a couple of other quick things. Diane Ackerman discusses this idea of getting outdoors to connect with spirituality. And in her book, Deep Play, she says the extraordinariness of the sacred, the way in which it swerves powerfully away from ordinary life, is part of its enchantment. Where should one go to find the sacred manifesting itself? And then she answers herself, remote places do admirably. And then she goes on to discuss the kind of spiritual experience of connecting with majestic places such as the Grand Canyon. Michael Pollan, for example, So McGurk, author of There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather, discusses how getting children outdoors as part of a parenting technique can really help them to thrive. And she quotes Richard Louv and says, "We have such a brief opportunity to pass on to our children our love for this earth and tell our stories. These are the moments when the world is made whole." Ben Klasky, who is a researcher in nature for children's well-being, discusses that if we find a way to expand or get children outdoors, we're going to be able to expand their window of tolerance and then kind of give ourselves this opportunity to grow as individuals. Michael Pollan is a well-known author and kind of discusses different ideas related to our relationship with food, relationship with nature. And this TED Talk is just really interesting, discussing our perspective and how that may differ from what a plant might see, and how we may benefit our society or our environment by actually looking from a plant's eye view instead of from our human's eye view. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight this last TED Talk. This is a TED Talk by, I'm going to say it wrong, Nixiwaka Yawanawa, an individual who comes from the Amazon. And he discusses how his relationship with nature really is part of his identity. And during his discussion, he just says one quote that I loved. He said, "For him and his people, forest means life. Forest means our body. Forest means everything." And I just thought that was a really beautiful way to say that nature may be a way to connect with our truest self, as well as with other aspects of spirituality. And so I just wanted to highlight one tool that I think is a useful way to connect with nature. This is just from a website called Live and Dare, but you can find resources anywhere. But it essentially outlines different options of ways to engage in a walking meditation. And so if that's something that you're interested in doing as a way to connect with nature, it's something that I definitely use as a tool with my clients. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Thanks so much.